Chapter 1. It was New Year's Eve when my husband, John Martin, suggested we go to the mountaintop to watch the fireworks. I thought it sounded romantic, just the two of us ringing in the new year under the stars. But instead of fireworks, I got a shove. "Lisa," John spat as I teetered on the edge. "Do you think Tegan was as scared as you are now? You drove her to her end with your lies, all because of some ridiculous marriage contract. You deserve to pay for what you did." The next thing I knew, I was falling, the world rushing past me in a blur. I watched him put on the performance of a lifetime, grieving husband, devastated by the loss of his wife. But behind closed doors, he was showering Tegan's family with affection, pretending like she had been the love of his life all along. What John didn't know was that Tegan hadn't gone when she threw herself into the river. No, she was still alive. Her family had been using him the whole time, milking him for everything they could get. Then something miraculous happened. I woke up. I was back in the past, on the very day John had vowed to marry no one but his true love, his perfect vision of Tegan Lewis. I smiled, clapping my hands like I was genuinely happy for him. "True love is such a rare thing," I said, my voice dripping with false sweetness. "Make sure you two stay happy forever." But I've been given a second chance. And here I am, back on John's birthday, the very day he introduced Tegan to his family as his girlfriend. I'm only ever going to love Tegan. I won't agree to this marriage with the White family no matter what. His voice was steady, full of conviction. He was holding her hand so tightly. In my last life, I didn't care who was watching. I stormed in, calling Tegan out, accusing her of manipulating John. I threw everything I had at them, and for a moment I left John speechless. Sure, I got what I wanted back then. The engagement stayed. But it wasn't long before it all came crashing down. Not only did I lose everything, but John shoved me off a cliff. But this time around, I've learned my lesson. This time I'm going to play the game differently. It's not easy finding true love, is it? I smirked as I looked at John, standing protectively in front of Tegan like I was some kind of threat. The whole thing was almost laughable. If your heart's with her, then there's no point in keeping up this marriage charade. I wish you both the best of luck. John blinked, clearly stunned. He wasn't expecting that. And I couldn't care less about the shocked expressions from everyone else in the room. Without another word, I walked past them and left. Everyone expected me to put up a fight. I had a reputation for being possessive, for being the kind of woman who'd tear apart anyone who came between me and John. They thought he brought Tegan here just to humiliate me, to watch me fall apart in front of everyone. But instead I let go. Calmly, gracefully. And that shocked them even more. It didn't fit the story they'd built around me. They all thought I was obsessed with him, that I'd do anything to keep him. They believed I loved him so much that I couldn't live without him. But none of them knew the truth. In my last life, after I humiliated Tegan in front of the whole family, she ran off in tears, her face burning red with shame. John, meanwhile, was punished by his grandfather for breaking the family rules. He spent a month locked away, and by the time he was released, Tegan had already thrown herself into the river. John didn't seem to care. He didn't cry, didn't mourn. He just calmly went ahead with the engagement to me as if nothing had happened. But this time, I'm not going to make the same mistake. I'm stepping aside, letting them have their love. I'll make sure they stay together, give them everything they think they want. I hope they enjoy their lifetime of happiness. Chapter 2. The news of my breaking off the engagement with John spread like wildfire. Is this for real? Didn't they say Lisa would fall apart if she got more than 3 feet away from John? So, all this time Lisa was just putting on a show for him? Guess some people really do enjoy being a doormat. John's the one parading around with a new girlfriend while still engaged. Honestly, it looks like he's the one who wanted out all along. Poor Lisa. As I scrolled through the endless stream of comments, I couldn't help but smirk. People were running wild with their theories, so I decided to stir the pot a little. I posted a heartfelt note. It wasn't long or dramatic. I simply said that John had found his true love, and even though we were engaged, I wanted to let him go so he could be happy. And just like that, the internet's sympathy for me skyrocketed. The hate turned on John and Tegan, and I watched as people tore into them with a kind of viciousness that was almost entertaining. It didn't take long for John to come charging over to me. "Lisa, what the hell are you playing at this time?" he snapped, his voice tight with anger. I rolled my eyes. "Playing? I'm not playing at anything. You found your true love, haven't you? I'm just happy for you. That's all." The sincerity in my voice must have thrown him off because he stood there for a second, staring at me like I'd grown a second head. "I'm never going to love you," he said coldly. "You should quit while you're ahead." I couldn't help but laugh inside. This was classic John, cold, indifferent, and heartless. The same guy who could act like Prince Charming one minute and shove you off a cliff the next. But this time, I'm not playing his game. "Don't worry," I said calmly. "I'm not interested in standing in your way." He left, and as I watched him walk off, my smile faded. My gaze turned sharp. In my last life, I'd done everything right, followed my parents' wishes, loved John with everything I had, tried to be the perfect wife. And for what? To be met with nothing but his cold rejection. But this time I'll just sit back and watch as Tegan bleeds him dry. When my mom heard about the broken engagement, she assumed I'd be heartbroken and immediately lined up a new batch of potential husbands. I shut that down real quick. Instead, I went to my dad and told him I was ready to take over the family business. He blinked in surprise, then reached out to feel my forehead. "Are you feeling okay? What brought this on?" I couldn't blame him. I'd graduated from a top university, sure, but I'd been so focused on John that I hadn't cared about the company. Dad had hinted more than once that I should get involved, but I always brushed him off. Now that I was finally stepping up, he was so thrilled he practically packed his bags and took my mom on a vacation the next day, leaving me in charge. I shook my head amused. If only they knew how much I've changed. Armed with the memories from my last life, I already knew what was coming. I knew every twist, every turn, every crisis the company would face. In my first week, I took on a project that everyone had written off as a lost cause. She must have lost her mind over some guy. That project's a guaranteed failure, and she signed off on it without even thinking. She's never been through the grind. Just another rookie walking straight into a disaster. I didn't waste time worrying about what they said. I knew better. By the end of the first month, that doomed project had doubled its profits. The first time they called it luck. Then came the second time. And the third. By the time the dust settled, no one was calling it luck anymore. The way people looked at me had changed. They respected me now, maybe even feared me a little. I was invited to a product launch event, and thanks to my dad's endless bragging, I'd earned a new nickname, Lisa Bill Gates. These compliments, they were something I never had in my last life. Back then, I worked myself to the bone in John's company, making him millions in profits. And yet he took all the credit. I was nothing more than a nameless assistant, invisible in his shadow. Speak of the devil. I turned my head and there he was, John, with Tegan hanging off his arm, sitting down at the table next to mine. Tegan, who clearly wasn't used to this kind of event, kept her head down, fidgeting nervously like a shy kitten. She hid behind John, clinging to him for dear life. And of course John was eating it up. He didn't see anything wrong with flaunting her like this at a public event. I had no intention of engaging with them, but John called out to me before I could turn away. "Lisa." He flashed me a smug smile. "You really went through all this trouble just to see me again, huh?" Chapter 3. I gave John a blank look, not quite grasping what he was getting at. This isn't exactly the kind of event where just anyone can show up. You must have gone through a lot of trouble to get your hands on an invite, knowing I'd be here. Tegan chimed in with a sugary smile. "Lisa, if you really wanted to see John, you could have just come straight to him. No need to go through all this effort." Watching their little back and forth, I couldn't help but laugh. At myself mostly. How had I ever fallen so hard for someone like John? What had I even seen in him? People were starting to notice the commotion, but I didn't care. I just smiled and said, "John, you're overestimating yourself. I was invited here as the CEO of White Rope. And as for us, we've been around each other since we were kids. Honestly, I've seen enough of you to last a lifetime." I shifted my gaze to Tegan, who was still hovering behind him like a shadow. "But if we're talking about who doesn't belong here, I'd say it's Miss Lewis. What are you relying on? Being John's girlfriend?" Tegan's face turned crimson and she stood there, frozen, unable to respond. Tears started welling up in her eyes and eventually she began to cry. Seeing his precious Tegan in tears, John's expression darkened. "Lisa, you really think you can run a company on your own? Who knows what kind of shady tricks you're using?" I shrugged, completely unfazed. "Guess we'll see whose company goes bankrupt first, won't we?" With that, I walked out of the event, leaving them both standing there. When my dad heard what had happened, he was furious. His face turned an unhealthy shade of purple. You should have slapped him. Why didn't you slap him? He treated you like that and you just stood there. He shouted. Don't tell me you still have feelings for that jerk. I gave him a weak smile and shook my head. I had to swear up and down that I didn't have any lingering feelings for John before Dad finally calmed down. He was ready to storm over to the Martin family and make a scene, but I managed to stop him. Our families had a long history together and I wasn't about to let a petty feud ruin that. As for John, I'd take care of him in my own way. There was no need for a showdown, just a clean final break. Back at the office, my employees were quick to offer their support. It wasn't until then that I found out someone had posted a video of the whole confrontation online. Everyone knew I'd cut ties with John. Boss, you put in all that work yourself. Who does John think he is, talking down to you like that? You should have shut him down right then and there. Show him who's really in charge. I just smiled, shaking my head at their frustration. Don't worry, I said. I'll make sure John understands exactly what I'm capable of. They still seemed confused when a new message popped up on my phone. After graduating college, I'd spent years working under John, helping him run his company. Naturally, I'd built some solid friendships along the way. Now, with Tegan constantly in his ear, John had all but checked out of the business. So, some of our former colleagues reached out to me for help. Without hesitation, I welcomed them into my company. By the time John realized what had happened, nearly 2 weeks had passed. He called me, his voice practically shaking with fury. Lisa, is this how you plan to get my attention? Well, let me tell you, it's not going to work, he yelled. In the background, I could hear Tegan's soft, comforting voice, trying to soothe him with her usual saccharine sweetness. Rolling my eyes, I held the phone away from my ear, waiting for their nauseating cooing to subside. When things quieted, I finally spoke. John, sweetie, it's not my fault you haven't been paying attention to me lately. For a moment, there was silence on John's end of the line. Sensing my chance, I jumped in. You're right, I shouldn't have poached your staff. How about I make it up to you? I still have that unfinished proposal from before. I can wrap it up and send it over as a peace offering. I made sure to sound as sincere as possible, even transferring some money as a gesture of goodwill. John let out a derisive snort. That's the least you could do. Get it to me by next week. But don't think for a second this changes anything. You're still nothing to me, so stop clinging to false hope. And with that, he hung up. My assistant, who had been quietly watching the whole exchange, couldn't contain her frustration any longer. Boss, you've left his company. Why are you still writing proposals for him? I smiled but didn't answer. Everyone knew how obsessed I'd been with John for most of my life. And John? He knew it too. This project was his safety net, and even though I wasn't working for his company anymore, he still figured I'd be loyal, that I'd do anything for him. But when the due date came and went and John still hadn't received my proposal, he started to panic. Lisa, what the hell are you playing at? I need that proposal today. It's due this afternoon. His voice was a storm of anger on the other end of the phone. I rubbed my eyes, feigning surprise. Oh right, my bad. I'll send it over in a minute. A few minutes later, I forwarded him the file. People said I was so used to being John's obedient little lapdog that I'd forgotten how to do anything else. But later that afternoon, one of my old colleagues from John's company called me, barely able to contain his laughter. You won't believe what happened. John opened the proposal, and instead of the document, there was a meme of Mr. Krabs saying, "Are you trying to help Plankton steal the Krabby Patty secret formula too?" I could practically see John's face turning crimson with rage, and it took everything in me not to burst out laughing. Sure enough, not long after, John called me again, but this time I wasn't foolish enough to pick up. I blocked him without a second thought. Word got around quickly that John had been fuming for days, and apparently not even Tegan could soothe him. She ended up getting kicked out of his office when she tried. I guess Tegan, always eager to play the perfect girlfriend, decided to take matters into her own hands. After John had been angrily stewing over the botched project for a few days, she showed up at my office. "Lisa, I know you don't like me, but you shouldn't take it out on John," she said, trying her best to sound innocent and concerned. I raised an eyebrow, amused by her nerve. Take it out on him? He's lucky I didn't do worse. Honestly, asking for a proposal from a competitor? That's just stupid. Tegan blinked, clearly not expecting that kind of response. After a moment of awkward silence, she finally managed to speak. John loves me. Just because he couldn't return your feelings doesn't mean you should treat him this way. You two had an amicable breakup, didn't you? Amicable breakup? I couldn't help but laugh. If John had wanted a friendly breakup, he wouldn't have paraded his new girlfriend around while we were still engaged. No, this was never about ending things peacefully. He just wanted to humiliate me, to force me to be the one to call off the engagement. I gave Tegan a once-over. She was the perfect picture of a damsel in distress. Delicate, innocent, the kind of girl who always needed saving. The exact opposite of me. Tegan, I said, a smirk playing on my lips. You're taking your role a little too seriously, don't you think? Chapter 4. Tegan was stunned. What do you mean? I sneered. The car accident John had on his business trip. You arranged it, didn't you? You staged a heroic rescue. Under Tegan's shocked gaze, I revealed all her secrets. In both my previous life and now, Tegan didn't love John. He just saw him as an ATM. To get close to John, Tegan staged a car accident and saved him, becoming his most cherished person. I had investigated this from the moment Tegan appeared by John's side. But John fell in love with her at first sight and wouldn't listen to a word I said. In my previous life, after I humiliated Tegan, she faked her death and had her family extort a lot of money from John. This time Tegan didn't die. She stayed by John's side and he spoiled her to the extreme, giving her everything she wanted. Tegan, don't provoke me. If you want money, ask John. If you push me too far, your secrets won't stay hidden. After warning her, I had her thrown out of my office. To my surprise, the seemingly clever Tegan went straight to John to complain. Probably because he had already scolded her before, John comforted her this time. Tegan's social media was updated again. This time, it was a necklace John had bought for 7 figures at an auction. That's favoritism. I worked hard for years and didn't get a good reputation. But a favorite sheds a tear and he tightens his belt to give her the best. After comforting his favorite, John came to trouble me. Maybe because I had ruined his project or made his beloved cry. John stormed into my office. He was furious. Before I could react, he blocked the door, gripping my hand tightly, his eyes full of disgust. "Song-jo, can't you leave Tegan alone?" he demanded. I couldn't help but laugh. "Are you blind? I'm just working here, being harassed by a couple of lunatics. Do I look like a masochist?" Chapter 5. Meanwhile, Tegan sent me a message. "Even if what you said is true, who do you think John will believe, me or you?" I found it amusing. Crazy. These two are absolutely crazy. Where does Tegan get the confidence to think I would warn her without evidence? Seeing the man in front of me still raging, I felt bored and didn't want to play along. "John, do you think you're the only man in the world?" Under his stunned gaze, I pulled out photos of the men my mother had introduced to me as potential backups. She had once told me to be a good wife. But after learning about John's actions, she changed her attitude overnight. There are plenty of fish in the sea. Why stick to one flower? Having options isn't being a backup. It's just keeping your options open. So my contacts were filled with various types of men. Young, muscular, handsome, and pure-hearted. For years I fed my true feelings to a dog. But remember, I'm here to date and marry, not to feed dogs. As for your little lover, don't trip in front of her. With that, I made a call and 3 minutes later James appeared in my office. "Sis," James greeted me obediently, then looked at John suspiciously. "Sis, who is he?" "An irrelevant person. Let's go to that restaurant you wanted to try." James nodded. But John grabbed my hand. "What do you mean by that?" "Exactly what it sounds like. Go back to your little lover, I have a date." James was good to me. He might not be as wealthy as John, but he was good in every other way. I thought about giving it a try, but my mother sternly reminded me, "You didn't see through John for over 20 years. How can you see through James in such a short time?" The idea of dating was dispelled by my mother and I decided to close my heart to love. Meanwhile, John and Tegan's relationship soon hit a snag. With my reminder, John became more observant. And what he found was that the 7-figure necklace Tegan had was listed on a trading market. When I heard this, I couldn't help but laugh. Every auction item is recorded. Tegan thought she could sell it with a little trick. What a joke. Tegan was smart, but sometimes she was really stupid. When I saw Tegan again, the once glamorous girl looked drained, her eyes red. In the office, Tegan clung to John's clothes, crying pitifully. Chapter 6. Mr. John, please don't kick me out. I was really wrong. Get out. John roared, sweeping everything off his desk. At the same time, John looked up and met my eyes. I was startled and quickly turned to leave. About half an hour later, John finally arrived. Jojo, have you thought about what I said? In the past, when I worked at the company, I handled everything meticulously. Now, I was no longer with the John Group, and with John and Tegan always together, the company missed many opportunities to turn things around. Its position was precarious and John had to rely on me. I didn't want to get involved, but John started playing the emotional card. Jojo, we've known each other since childhood. Please help me. If my dad finds out about this, he'll kill me. I found it amusing. Am I your childhood friend or your tool? John's face stiffened. After all, our families were old friends. My achievements were evident, while John had caused the company to lose money daily because of a woman. Even for the sake of face, John was under a lot of pressure. Jojo, don't be so heartless. I know you're capable. Can you give me the East Side project this time? I was taken aback. Do you really want it? He nodded. I trust your judgment. If you want it, you can have it. So John signed the contract. But it didn't take long for the other party to run away. John, furious, found me. Songjo, did you know about this? I looked at him blankly. Of course I did. The other party was a shell company that had given me benefits to offload it. John was the fool who took the bait. Did you do this on purpose? Not telling me to make me look bad. No, you didn't ask. Who was wronged? I was the most wronged one. But John didn't care and started throwing a fit in my office. He didn't expect that I was prepared. The next moment, John's parents arrived at the door with the news. The Martin family was already at fault for breaking off the engagement. Now, with John throwing a tantrum at me after the breakup, they had no choice but to apologize. To ensure there were no future problems, I decided to lay everything out. I handed over all the evidence I had gathered about Tegan's schemes to John's parents. John had said many good things to get his family to accept Tegan. The only thing that had convinced them was that Tegan had supposedly saved John from a car accident. But now, with the evidence in hand, John's parents were silent and John was stunned. The documents included a recording of the driver Tegan had hired, clearly stating that Tegan was the mastermind behind the accident. Auntie, uncle, I swear I didn't do it. I truly love John. How could I plan something like this? Tegan knelt in the living room, tears streaming down her face, looking pitiful. Seeing that John's parents were unmoved and even John was glaring at her, Tegan went mad and shouted at me, "It's all Songjo's doing. She wants to drive me away from John." I shrugged. John knew better than anyone that I had no interest in him. I wouldn't go to such lengths for someone like Tegan. The evidence was clear and undeniable, leaving Tegan speechless. Thinking about the 7-figure necklace she had tried to sell, John's face darkened. He had her things thrown out that very day. As for John, after it was discovered that he had spent a fortune on a woman with ulterior motives and caused the company to lose millions, his father punished him severely and took away his management rights. Chapter 7. John spent over half a month at home recovering from his injuries before coming to apologize to me, as his father had instructed. When John arrived, I was having afternoon tea with James. Could you please wait for us over there for a moment? John asked James. James, startled, was about to leave. But I stopped him. Why should he leave? This is his reserved spot. If you need help, at least show some manners. John's face stiffened and he reluctantly said, "Could you please wait for us over there? I need to talk to Songjo." Only then did I let James go. John finally apologized sincerely. "I'm sorry, Yoyo. I shouldn't have ignored your advice." I just smiled. "You're only apologizing because you were deceived and lost the company. If none of this had happened, you wouldn't feel guilty at all." He felt sorry for himself, not for me. From beginning to end, John was selfish. Exposed, John's face turned red. "Yoyo, I'm sorry. Can you forgive me?" "Forgive?" I laughed. If I forgave John this time, the me from my previous life would never forgive myself. I decisively rejected John. He looked a bit dejected. After a long pause, he tentatively asked, "Jojo, why do you seem to hate me overnight? You used to like me a lot." Maybe for John it seemed like overnight. But for me it was many years, 2 lifetimes. From the moment John pushed me off the cliff, my feelings for him turned into endless hatred and disgust. He made me die a gruesome death while I only took away what he shouldn't have had. I had already been more than fair. But I didn't mention any of this. I simply said, "Nothing much, I just stopped loving you. I could have had a better life and shouldn't have settled for less with you." After this, I didn't contact John for several months. The next news I heard was that John's father, to teach him the value of money, made him earn $7 million on his own before he could return home. John, exhausted from work, had a car accident. Even then, his father didn't visit him once in the hospital. Once he recovered, John threw himself back into work, no longer having the energy for new flings. As for Tegan, she probably set her sights on another wealthy man. Using the same tricks, Tegan successfully married into a wealthy family, unaware that she had fallen into a trap. The family already knew about Tegan's past exploits. With the previous wife having died in childbirth, leaving a mess behind, Tegan ended up as a glorified housekeeper and nanny. But not even a nanny, as nannies get paid. She was just a housewife. As for me, I lived a life with a cheat code. With the memories of my past life, every investment I made was profitable, and I quickly took over my father's position. People asked me how I managed to achieve so much in such a short time. I thought about it. Probably by closing my heart to love and staying away from men, everything went smoothly. Hearing this, James widened his eyes. "Sis, what about me?" "You too." James blushed and ran away. But he came back the next day with roses, saying he wanted to make it up to me. The truth is, when you are excellent and have your own ideas, there will always be someone who will come to you.